welcome to Extra Blue. I am excited to bring a new guest to the podcast today, and this is going to be a little bit of a different format for this conversation. But I am sitting next to my boyfriend, Thomas, and we're switching the mic over. So he is actually going to be asking me questions and interviewing me about this past season and kind of reflecting on what goes into an Olympic year and what comes out of an Olympic year. And my goal is to not cry, but we will see if that happens or not. But I'm excited to just be really open and honest and I guess transparent with all of the listeners here and share the journey that it's been, I guess, the last little bit. So with that, I will hand it over to Thomas to be host of this episode of Extra Blue.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really excited. I've been waiting to get brought on as a guest, but I guess we'll start as a guest host, and then maybe eventually I'll be important enough to get brought on. Okay, the main focus of the episode, we'll be talking about the season and reflecting back on missing out on the Olympics and setting a really big goal and coming up short. But I think in order to talk about the Olympics, it's a 4-year window. And so we need to talk about kind of the culmination of the 4 years building up and all the hard work that goes into that process of getting yourself putting yourself in the position, I guess, to qualify for the Olympic team. So I'd like to start by just zooming out a little bit to give this broader perspective of what an Olympic cycle looks like before we dive into the specifics of this season. And I think you went through a couple of big changes over the last 4 years. The major one that sticks out to me is spring of 2024. You decided to leave your club team in Stratton, Vermont, and move back to your hometown, move back to the Twin Cities, move back to Minnesota, and join Team Berkey. And so I would love to hear your perspective on what brought about that change and why you felt like a change in club was important for you in order to set yourself up for the World Cup seasons that followed and eventually a World Champs and an Olympic bid.
Yeah, spring of 2024, we were coming off of the Minneapolis World Cup, which was both perfectly timed and so poorly timed as far as my athletic journey, because I had been having just a tough time with, I guess, where I was at in life in Stratton. And I'd had an incredible, 5 or 6 years in Stratton, and with the SMS T2 team, I had developed immensely as an athlete, and I feel like as a human also, and grown up a lot. And I am so grateful for my time in Stratton, and the team there, the coaches, the support community, like they are all incredible. And I am very fond of many memories in Stratton. And at the same time, for over a year at that point, I just felt like something wasn't really clicking for me anymore. And I wasn't feeling so fulfilled or just like I had a great life balance with sport, and therefore didn't feel like I was in a great place mentally. And that was really showing up in my ski results then, the season of 2023 to 2024. And, I barely qualified for the Minneapolis World Cup. And as an athlete who has raced many, many World Cups like that, and we get extra starts for the Minneapolis World Cup because it's on home soil. And so to barely qualify was really hard for me to handle. And I'm really proud of how I did qualify. And I showed up, ready to give it my best in Minneapolis, but my body just wasn't really in a place. My body and mind weren't really in a place to have an outstanding performance in front of the home crowd. But what was really amazing is that it didn't seem to matter to the home crowd that I wasn't there to win the race necessarily. They were ready to support me no matter what the result was. And the just people who showed up, the passion that showed up to Minneapolis, it really kind of reset things for me. And racing in that environment at Worth, where I had grown up doing so many high school races, and that was my first junior nationals at Worth. And it just felt like there was so much of a full circle moment for me. And ultimately I walked out of that realizing like that's kind of what I'm missing, is being connected with that community, and um, yeah, bringing the circle back around to the skiers who raised me and who inspired me. And so ultimately I did make that decision to move back to the Midwest and join Team Berkey, and to kind of integrate with the ski community in the Midwest. And um, yeah, I'm really proud of that move, and it was a big change for me. But I feel like it has been good.
Yeah, I think being a spectator at the Minneapolis World Cup, you really felt just the passion of the Midwest in the Nordic community. It was incredible watching the crowds cheer everyone on, and every time you could follow the U.S. Athletes around the track just based on where the loud screaming was coming from. It was so fun. With that move, obviously, you're moving back and you're feeling more supported by the community and everything. But at the same time, you're leaving a team that has athletes like Jessie Diggins, like Julia Kern, like Ben Ogden, right? These elite level World Cup athletes who you had been training with for the past 6 years. What is that transition like, going to a Team Berkey where now you're sort of the flagship female athlete on that roster? And how does that dynamic impact your summer training as you integrate into a new team and a new environment?
It was really cool to kind of step into more of that, I guess, leadership role, I would say. And there were still a lot of foreign aspects to it, right? Because I'm new to a team. I'd never been on Team Berkey before, and Team Berkey didn't exist when I was in high school or college or coming out of college. And so I didn't really know what my role was going to look like as I kind of moved back home. And so some of it felt like I was coming home and going back to normal, quote, but then part of it felt like super foreign to me. And um, the biggest foreign aspects I feel like was getting used to the traffic again, both driving to practice and out on the roads while roller skiing or biking or running. Living in southern Vermont, I was just used to never having traffic ever. And
the only traffic is when the cows are crossing the road.
exactly.
And you have to kind of wait for that otherwise.
Yeah.
We don't like stoplights.
Yeah. So that was like the biggest transition for me. But yeah, it was great to kind of feel like there was new challenges to overcome, right? It wasn't so much about like I needed to find hills, or I needed to find terrain that was going to challenge me, and that was a challenge to find in the Midwest. But you can do it. I don't think it's impossible, and I think that Team Berkey has proven that it's not impossible over the last few years. And so it just brought about new challenges, I guess, and it also kind of made me reflect a little more about like, why am I doing this and why am I showing up every day? Because there weren't Jessie Diggins or Julia Kearns or Ben Ogden's at practice to help motivate, but I don't think that that's necessary to have these Olympians at practice to feel motivated. And you can feel really inspired by the people around you, no matter what level they're at, because they are there showing up every day with the best attitude they can and ready to work hard. And at the end of the day, that's all you really need. And so yeah, just kind of leaning into that.
Yeah, I think it's really special, and I think that's cool. A cool perspective to have is when you're training with other elite athletes, right? You can just rely on them to kind of help you get out of bed in the morning, and you can just show up, and whatever Jessie's doing, you can do that, or whatever Ben's doing, you can kind of follow that, and really having to look internally and internalize what's the best for Alayna today, and no one else is going to be showing up and doing the work for me. Figuring that out. One last thing with Team Berkey, you mentioned there was no Team Berkey kind of as you were growing up and in high school. How do you feel like the team, and moving back to Minneapolis, what is the impact that the team has on sort of that high school Nordic skiing world, and how do you feel like you were able to integrate and be impactful for the next Alayna who's coming up, Nordic skiing in high school?
There wasn't a Team Berkey, but there was the CXC Elite team. And at the time when I was 14 or 15 years old, that consisted of Jessie Diggins, Caitlin Gregg, Brian Gregg, Garrett Cuzzy, Maria Stuber, all of these really incredible skiers and athletes who have gone on. I mean, I'm missing so many. Like there were a lot of them, and so for me, when I was 14 or 15, that still existed. And I would go to a training camp in Hayward and I got to train with them. And so that inspired me. I got to ski behind Jesse when I was 14 and I was not able to keep up, but I did whatever I could to try. And that kept me so motivated then, like throughout the summers when I was training and getting ready for other high school races. And so I think now, CXC Elite team ended up folding, and there was this interim where there wasn't really a pro team in the Midwest, but now it's come back around. And I think from that direct experience of mine, I see the value in having a pro team in the Midwest and how much that inspired me. And I hope that our presence in the Midwest is inspiring, the thousands of Minnesota State High School League skiers or the Wisconsin or Michigan State High School League skiers, right? There are so many. And I think with the professional team in the Midwest, like that's the perfect way to continue to inspire and bring up a next generation of really talented athletes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then one other aspect that I think is worth bringing up just to help paint the picture is you find yourself in this unique position where you are a full-time World Cup athlete racing. This was your third full season racing World Cup, but you're not a supported U.S. ski team athlete. And so you find yourself kind of in this gray area where you qualify and race World Cups, but you're not a named U.S. ski team athlete. Talk to us about just what that dynamic is like. I know that they do integrate you pretty well during the year and you get quite a bit of support, but it's also you're not getting the same support as a named athlete.
Yeah, the criteria as you get older gets harder and harder. And so if I needed a top 30 on the World Cup when I was 24, I maybe would have gotten 31st or 32nd and didn't make that criteria. And then when I got top 30 when I was 25, it wasn't enough anymore. And so the criteria gets harder as you get older. And therefore, I feel like for the last 8 years, I've kind of just always been on this bubble of just barely not making it. And my results have improved. I've gotten better, but not at a rate of which the criteria gets harder. And so I have found myself in a position where I'm always just barely not making the national team, but I am qualifying for World Cups. And so that means that I have the opportunity to go race and represent Team USA and wear their national suit. But I don't get any of the financial support. I don't get really any support outside of the season. I can tag along with them during the season. And so when we, book flights from Ruka, Finland to Lillehammer, Norway, I'm told this is the flight to get on, and we'll have transportation to and from the airport, and you'll stay with the team at this hotel. But then I get a bill for every move, and I have to book the flights myself. And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of integrated into the traveling circus, but I am still my own travel agent, and I'm paying for all of it. And having to kind of put any additional padding into the season, like a Christmas break, that all comes down to me just finding a place to stay over in Europe because there's not enough time to go back home between period one and the Tour de Ski. And so it is a very interesting balance to navigate, I guess. A lot of it comes down to like the finances, but also it comes down to what type of support you're getting from coaches throughout the season and at camps. And yeah, it's not easy. um, and sometimes you feel like you don't always belong, but usually I just try to channel that into my racing and give them a reason to believe that I do belong.
Yeah. And I think, there we could talk endlessly about logistics and how difficult that is to the team is staying at this hotel, but it's more expensive. Do you stay there? Or do you find cheaper lodging? They're getting into that. But I want to focus a little bit more on the coaching side. Could you talk a little bit, I guess, how you structured your coaching with Team Berkey and then how that is complemented or what it's like being on the road where, when you're on the road, it's the U.S. ski team coaches are there, but they aren't necessarily your coaches. And so while other athletes who are named to the team are able to just interact with their coaches on the road, you're dealing with satellite coaches with Team Berkey and how that dynamic kind of works.
Yeah, I mean, on the road, I've pretty much always had to work with satellite coaches because even when I was with Stratton, sometimes the Stratton coach would come over to Europe and be able to come over for some World Cups, but mostly it is satellite coaching. And so when I made the switch to Team Berkey, it actually felt not that foreign to have kind of satellite coaching. And I was working mostly with Chad Salmella, who was the high performance director of Team Berkey at the time and had incredible knowledge on physiology and was really able to kind of look at, Alayna, the individual athlete, and what's going to make Alayna better, not necessarily what's going to make a whole team better or trends that they're seeing in other skiers, right? Like it was very specific, which is what I was looking for at the time. And then also working with the rest of the Team Berkey coaches at the time. So like Julianne Zrud and Jake Stiley. And yeah, continuing to then work with them from afar in Europe throughout the winter has its challenges, right? Because oftentimes we're racing at like 11 a.m. in Europe, which is like 3 a.m. in the Midwest. And luckily, Chad also is an announcer and wakes up at 2 or 3 every weekend to announce the races. And so there have been times when I've had to make a call to him and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and he answers because he's awake. um, to determine like, should I race or I'm feeling ill or something like that. And so that actually did work out, quite well that he was at least awake, but that was pretty rare, right? And I also didn't need to always call him at 3 a.m. But it does bring it about its challenges because these coaches can't necessarily see how I'm racing, how I'm skiing in the easy days, how I'm skiing in workouts from race to race. They can't look at my energy. They can't necessarily like perceive, okay, it looks like Alayna's struggling with this, or maybe she's doing this really well, but she just needs like one extra recovery day, right? And so that's what a lot of coaching is being able to see that where the athlete can only do they can't see themselves always, right? um, and I didn't really get that from the coaches that were part of the national team because it's not their job to give that to me. And I can go and ask for certain things and they might offer certain things, but it's pretty far and few between. And so a lot of it came down to just me having to be brutally honest with myself and then also communicating those feelings and emotions to my coaches too. And that sounds easy, but when there's a time change and they're heavy emotions and you're traveling to a different country and it's hard to get that communication through all of those time zones.
Yeah. No, and I would argue that it is not no part of that is easy. And from a coaching perspective, there are so many times when I would be having dinner with my athlete, and just their body language or the energy that I can perceive could change what we're doing at training the next day, right? And it's just those little nuances that I think are definitely get lost when you're trying to do the satellite coaching. That is really difficult to keep up with that and to be able to make adjustments on like a day-to-day basis. Whereas maybe you can keep the grand scheme going. As we shift into this season, this past season, knowing like going into the summer, right? That's kind of when every Nordy, May 1st, right, is when every Nordy's next season starts. What does that summer look like knowing that it's leading into an Olympic year?
Yeah, I was trying not to put so much pressure. I didn't want it to be this constant in my head of, every training session is going to get me to the Olympics, right? At the same time, I'm working towards a goal and I want that goal to motivate me. And so throughout the last 2 years, I've had these mantras that have kind of kept me going when things get tough in training. And, one of my mantras was, because I can, right? And I was doing these workouts because I can. And I was finding an individual plan that was tailored to my physiology because I can. And I was pushing myself in new ways that I hadn't tried before because I can. Another mantra that I had last year was to embrace it. And that could mean to embrace the pain in an interval. That could mean to embrace the pouring rain when weather does come in. That could mean embrace it when I'm stuck in traffic trying to get to practice and I'm ultimately late. But those mantras that I carry with me they are a way to kind of remind me on a day-to-day basis, like what I'm trying to do in a bigger scale without it being this is for the Olympics and it's Olympics or bust, right? It's still focused on that big goal without putting all of the weight on my shoulders every single day. And so, yeah, I was trying to really kind of lean into those during the training sessions, but then also not lose touch the with Alayna the person, because I I think one of the biggest things that I learned towards the end of my time in Stratton, was that I really needed to balance Alayna the athlete with Alayna the person. And I was not going to be in a happy or therefore fast performing position if I didn't have a balance of that. And so outside of training, I was really focused the last year on also being Alayna the person. And that meant having a job that was helping me pay for all of these World Cup expenses, being really close with my family and friends in Minneapolis, being part of Team Berkey, trying to integrate with the ski community more, being able to, I guess, invest in more of my hobbies too. And so although I was in a way always kind of in the back of my head thinking about the Olympics, I also couldn't just focus on that all the time. I needed to have some separation from it. And so, yeah, that was definitely what I was carrying through like summer and fall of last year.
How do you feel like you manage that? Because obviously, when you set a goal like qualifying for the Olympics, I think you explained it well. It can be both a motivator and like, oh, I need to push harder in these intervals because I want to go to the Olympics, or it can also just be that over like the cloud that just hangs over you all the time where, oh man, my friends are going to watch this soccer game, but I'm supposed to go to the gym this afternoon. How do I choose the difference? Or my family wants to go to the cabin, but I was supposed to do workouts in the cities. This like, how did it's an easy topic, I think. And I think it's a super important piece of your success is finding this balance between Alayna, the professional skier, and Alayna, the individual. How do you feel like that balance? How do you feel like you found that balance? And I guess, are there some struggles with that, or do you feel like it went pretty well?
Yeah, there's always going to be struggles with that, and I think it's kind of a constant battle, and something that I always have to like check in with myself on is, you know, am I still balancing this well and in a healthy way? And am I managing that balance well? Or are things getting out of balance? Am I being so focused on the athletics and the training in the Olympics that I'm holding the grip too tight? And do I need to loosen that grip? And maybe I skip a strength workout, or I alter a workout because I want to get on the road to get to the cabin, right? Like it there are times when it is important to loosen the grip, but then I'll check in with myself again and wonder like, oh, have I, every Friday night I've gone out with my friends and, had a drink or two. Maybe I need to scale that back a little bit, right? And really focus on like my sleep and recovery and make sure that I'm getting that. And so it is something that you just kind of always have in the back of your mind, or at least I do, and that is hard because pretty much every decision you make in your day, which humans are, they make like 1,000 decisions a day or something, and pretty much every decision affects or impacts your athletic outcome in some way, right? Even what you wear that day, is it going to be sweat absorbent enough? Is it going to be waterproof, or is it going to keep you protected against the wind? What you eat that day, is it going to be enough fuel? Is it going to be the right fuel? Is it going to be too much fuel and you're going to have GI issues? Every single decision you make is going to impact the outcome of your performance. And that is very daunting. And so you almost have to not think about that and make wise decisions, but don't get so hyper focused on them that it's going to drive you crazy.
Yeah, I think it's a super tricky balance to find, right? It's that you can't look at it black and white where it's just like, everything can be totally optimized and perfect versus just not caring about anything. And it doesn't need to be one or the other, right? It's kind of like finding that and allowing it to slide a little bit, I think is something that you did well this summer. Where some weeks, you focused a little bit more on optimizing everything and following the routine, making sure your outfits are both cute and functional, and making sure that you're properly fueled and we're sleeping enough and we're not going to Portugal for a wedding or something. But then other times, you were able to dial it back and really enjoy and be in the moment and enjoy your friends, family, and Alayna, the social individual. So I think I think you did a good job this summer, and I think it is a really challenging battle every day to kind of figure out where you're going to fall in that scale.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point also, like one that I didn't even think about, but we had a wedding in Portugal last summer that was a really close friend of yours from childhood, and we wanted to go support and be part of that moment for them. And I had to make the decision: am I going to Portugal for a week to go to this wedding and give myself like a little bit of a break from the full, tightly gripped, structured training? Um, or do I need to be so focused that I have to say no to that? And that was a moment where I said, no, I want to be part of that. And I can adjust training a little bit. I can make it work for a week, right? And I think it did work, but it also meant that I needed to get home and get back to structured training after that. And so there's always like a give and take to it.
Yeah. And so after you get through the summer and the fall, and I think in these periods, obviously the Olympics is looming, but also you're just kind of going through your natural routines and stuff. And then we get to Ruka, and Ruka is always this crazy time, I feel like, for the Nordies, because everyone has spent the entire summer and fall grinding, right? You spend all these training sessions to get ready, and no one knows how Ruka is going to go, right? And it's your first World Cup, everyone's there. Usually, just on a normal year, there's always a little bit of this odd tension, I feel like, leading into Ruka, and then you add on top of that it's an Olympic year. How do you feel like it was leading into Ruka and preparing for that first race?
Yeah, I felt oddly calm about it all. I felt like I had positioned or prepared myself in a really great way where I knew that it wasn't like it can't be about one race. It has to be about a collective of races. And so I went into those races just trying to think of doing my best and making sure that I could show up with the best positive energy and mentality as possible. And I felt very prepared in what I had done with my training. I felt like I had done what I could. And at the end of the day, that's all you can really do. And so I I think I approached Ruka, yeah, very calm. And I had my best like opening races there ever. And so I was really excited about that.
Yeah. And I think we can backtrack a little bit. Obviously, Olympic criteria, is something that is looming. Like when we talk about the Olympics, we're talking about Olympic criteria and qualifying for the team. In general terms, the two main paths to qualify for the Olympics are you can be top 50 ranked in either the sprint list or the distance list, or you can make it off the domestic list based on Super Tour points. Mm-hmm. And so how much is that on your mind going into the opening World Cup races?
Yeah, and that it is on my mind a lot, but it's on my mind earlier in the season at first, right? Because you have to make this decision. Am I going to try to qualify based off the World Cup criteria or based off the domestic criteria? And so I needed to make that decision basically in like August and tell the ski team, am I going to the World Cup or not? And so I made that decision in August that I was going to try to qualify off the World Cup. Um, and so I was pretty dead set on staying on the World Cup track through period 1, 2, and 3 and trying to be in the top 50 on the sprint or distance list. And is it the top 50?
It was top 45, and then once the Russians started racing, right. It moved to top 50.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So to start technically at Ruka, it was still top 45, but then based on the IOC rulings, then Russians were allowed to enter World Cup racing again, qualifiers, and so then it moved to top 50.
Thank God you're here, because there are already things that I've blacked out from this season.
I spent way too many hours reading over World Cup Olympic qualifications and making sure we knew exactly what we were getting ourselves into.
Yeah. So ultimately, going into Ruka, I felt like I was ready to qualify out the World Cup and ready to keep kind of just plugging away at that, and basically just telling myself, like, you just have to race as hard as you can in each of these races, and they're going to accumulate to get you into a position where you can be in that top 45 or 50 ranking.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's a super healthy way, I think, to go into it, is that you can think about how big of a goal it is to be top 50 in one of these standings. But at the end of the day, on a day-to-day basis, what are you going to do? You have to go out and you just have to race your best. And if you're racing your best, I think it's also worth saying that it was very similar criteria for world champs the year before, in which case you did qualify for the world champs team based off your World Cup standings because you were ranked well enough in both sprint and distance standings. So it wasn't that the World Cup standings, it was something that you had done the year before. So I think that you could bring that confidence into it. And I think it was a really great way to approach the races, where it's just, what can I do today? How can I perform? Or, if I go out and ski my best today, that'll give me the best result I can. And if I just can keep accumulating points, it'll put me in a great spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I definitely carried with, right? As you said, it was actually in 2023 and 2025, our world champs years. Yeah. And those years, it was the same criteria. I had to be top 45 on either the sprint or the distance list. And I qualified for both of those. I made that criteria. I made both of those teams. And so knowing that I had done it twice before, I felt like going into the season, I can do it again this season, right? Nothing's different. Yeah. I've done it. I can do it again. And so that was part of the decision-making process back in August. And then also throughout the first period of racing too, right? Just knowing, like, these races, it doesn't need to be like one outstanding race that like no one was expecting, right? It can just be day after day, solid work.
Yeah. And as you said, period one went pretty well. It was unfortunately classic heavy, where skating is always maybe a little bit more of your forte. So unfortunately, period one was pretty classic heavy, but in the skate races, you performed really well. You were top 30 in the first 20K. You went down to Davos, top 30 in the sprint skate, and then just outside of the top 30 and 33rd, I think, in the 10K skate. So at the end of period one, you're qualified. You're in the top 50 in the sprint standings. I think you're just outside the top in the distance, but right knocking on the door. And you're deciding between, do I stay in Europe and try and keep racing World Cups to maintain that top 50 standing, or do I go back to the US to race US Nationals in order to try and get yourself up in the super tour standings to solidify a domestic spot? Walk us through kind of how you're feeling during this Christmas period when you're making this decision.
Yeah, I really can't wait for the day when Christmas feels fun. I shouldn't say it that way, because Christmas is always fun, but Christmas break always happens right before some of the most important races of the ski season, at like really from the time that you're in high school until forever. US Nationals are always right after Christmas. There's always like really big, the Tour de Ski is right after Christmas. There's criteria that closes right after Christmas. And so it feels like Christmas break is always like there's some anxiety that's behind that, right? And I think any athlete who says that they don't feel that is, maybe not being fully honest with themselves. So I was feeling that. I was feeling anxious and nervous about it, but not trying to not let it like consume me. And one thing that I want to point out is that to gain World Cup points, you have to have a result in the top 50. And those points then accumulate over time. And those accumulated points then give you your ranking in the sprint or distance or overall list. And so in a regular World Cup, you basically just need to be top 50 to score points. Ideally, you're high in that top, or like in a, lower on that top 50, right? You have a good result, you get more points. And so then you're higher on the ranking list. One thing that I want to point out, though, is that during the Tour de Ski, World Cup points only go out to the top 30, not the top 50. And so in order to change your standing in the sprint or distance list at all throughout the Tour de Ski, you have to be getting top 30s. Otherwise, you're just going to keep moving backwards. And so that was something that was on my mind a lot over Christmas. I've had many top 30s. I've had top 20s on the World Cup, right? I know that I can do it. But I realized I needed to have multiple top 30s to keep my sprint ranking in the top 50 and then gain that top 50 ranking in the distance. And once again, the Tour de Ski was classic heavy, and it's not my specialty. And there were new formats in the Tour de Ski this year. There was a 5K mass start wave race that we had no idea what that was going to bring, right? Was that going to be a complete disaster, or was it going to give me the best success ever? Because I can skate ski, and I can, have this physiology between sprint and distance, right? But you never know what's going to happen, and it was a completely new format for us. And so over Christmas, I was kind of looking at the lineup of races that were coming in the Tour de Ski and which races I felt confident that I could do well in. And the first one was the skate sprint and toe block, which is where I've had my historical best result ever. And so I felt like that was a really great opportunity for me to go and score great sprint points. But then the next sprint in the Tour de Ski wasn't until the second to last day, and it was a classic sprint, and you'd have to race 4 or 5 times before you even got there. And in my experience in racing the Tour de Ski, I don't have that much pep in my step after 4 or 5 days of racing. And to go out and do a classic sprint is really hard for me at that point. And I was just kind of looking at the facts of, it's not that likely that I'll get a top 30 in that classic sprint and score more points. And so I was looking at the calendar then also of lining up the Tour de Ski races versus the US Nationals races. And I felt like if I went into the Tour de Ski and had an incredible result in the skate sprint, then I would set myself up in a position to be in a really good spot on the sprint list for qualifying for the Olympics. If I didn't have a great result there, I felt like I was in a position where maybe I needed to consider going back home and racing US Nationals to then qualify off of the domestic list. And yeah, so that's what was going through my brain over Christmas dinner. And you were there, and that I was kind of tearing myself up about it. And I was talking to you, I was talking to all of my coaches, I was talking to my family, trying to figure out, what do I do here? And I ultimately decided to give myself that chance in the toe block skate sprint. And if things went really well, I was going to stay and keep doing the Tour de Ski. And if things didn't go well, then I was going to make that jump, go back home and race at US Nationals. And there are many moments throughout the last few months where I could go back and look at that and ask myself, like, would I do that differently? And honestly, I can't stand to beat myself up over what ifs. And so I just kind of choose not to go back. But I do acknowledge that was a turning point in my season. And ultimately, I raced in that skate sprint and toe block. I would say, very unfortunately, was seated as bib one, which in a skate sprint qualifier is not great. There is something to be said about having some sort of rabbit to chase. And so I went out and I thought I was skiing really fast, and I thought I had prepared myself well over Christmas. I had done sprint simulation workouts. I was really dialed for that race. And for whatever reason, things didn't come together on that day, and I did not have a great qualifier. And so I made that decision that very day. I took a bus to Venice, and the next morning I flew from Venice to Boston and started preparing for US Nationals that were going to start, I think it was like 4 days later.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about US Nationals. I want to go back to just the approach to that toe block sprint. In the conversation that we've had, it's and the approach to Ruka and kind of these period one starts. It's this idea of, oh, I want to qualify for the Olympics. How do I qualify? I race my best, and I'll just go out and try my best every day, take that result, and just kind of keep building. Now, all of a sudden, as the pressure builds a little bit, and as this qualification kind of starts to come into focus of what really needs to happen, you're going into these toe block races, and you're talking about, I need a top 20, I need a top 30, right? And it's becoming more about the placements rather than just going and racing. What did it feel? Did you, from my perspective, the pressure is kind of ramping up as we get through this Christmas block. What is your mindset kind of getting to the line in toe block, where you're like, wow, if I get a top 20 today, I stay and I keep racing World Cup. If I don't get a top 20, then I should probably go back and race US Nationals. How does that change your approach to the race? How does that change your, I guess, how are you feeling on the start line there in Toblach?
I was nervous. And I was also trying to continue to tell myself that this is where I want to be. This is what I'm trying to do. And I'm really fortunate to be doing this. And I was really nervous. But I was still trying to smile to myself, and I was using positive self-talk and focusing on what could happen and what I wanted to have happen and how prepared I was. And I really felt like I had done the work. I had put in very focused training workouts to prepare for that one race. And I really tried to just lean on that. And yeah, a sprint qualifier is so brutal because it's so fast and it's so long at the same time. And yeah, it went by too fast.
No. And I will say I should take some of the blame. The last 4 Christmases, we've always done fondue over Christmas. And this year I forgot to get the fondue cheese as we were leaving Switzerland. And so I blew it on our Christmas dinner. And so I take some of the blame for the not having all of the jump on that sprint qualifier. I guess then on the back half of that, right, you're on the bus to Venice, right,
Yeah.
to fly back east for nationals. What are the feelings on the bus, right? You tried, you didn't have your best sprint qualifier, right? You didn't get that result that you felt like you needed in order to stay in Europe and keep racing World Cup. What are the feelings on that bus ride down to Venice?
In that moment, all I can tell myself is this is the path, and this is going to work, and this is going to be great, and I'm going to rock these races. Like I'm dialed, and I'm so ready. And honestly, that's all I can tell myself.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's all you can tell yourself, right?
Yeah.
Is that you're doing the right thing and that it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Then we get into US Nationals. They're in Lake Placid, a place where you really love racing and have had historically some great results. You get to Nationals, you have some great results, right? You get second in the skate sprint, but then some of the other results don't quite come together. Skis, you struggle with skis. You're flying your fleet back, right? You're now no longer working with your technician that you've been working with all season. We talked a little bit about it when with your switch to Solomon. All of a sudden, you're having to decide which ski, which flex, how are they getting waxed, right? All of these factors that usually you're working with your tech on. Now you're working with other coaches who you don't necessarily have that experience with. And so ultimately, things don't line up in US Nationals, doesn't go according to plan. So you are the first alternate on that domestic list. You hop back on the plane to fly back to Europe to try to solidify that sprint standing spot. You know, you're still ranked in the top 50. You're still qualifying off of World Cup criteria. What is your mindset, I guess, now leaving Nationals, having gone to Nationals, tried, having had some success, but not, I mean, at the end of the day, also the Nationals thing, it wasn't an easy task, right? You're coming into Nationals to try to jump a lot of people in Super Tour rankings. When they've been racing Super Tours, they've been building their points all season, right? Nationals are a double points. So you can score extra points compared to a normal Super Tour, but still you needed to be winning or podiuming every race. And so that's no small feat, especially against other athletes who have decided in August, when you decided to go for the World Cup, they decided I'm going to race only domestics. And so there's a lot of elite level skiers who focus on just racing those. And so when that doesn't come together, you only find the podium once instead of the 3 times you were hoping to be there. How are you feeling, and what is your mindset kind of leaving Nationals as you look forward to the next World Cup back over in Europe?
I was really down. And I was frustrated that things hadn't come together. You know, so many things have to work out to have a good ski day. And I had 3 days that were not good ski days. And that really crushed me. And I was upset about it. And that happens in the same way that there are some days when your body just doesn't respond. There are days when the skis aren't there. And it's unfortunate timing, Um, but it's part of the sport. And so I let myself cry about it. um, and I was honestly feeling quite down. I had had really high hopes. I believed in myself going into US Nationals. I feel like I did what I could to race and prove myself and prove to everyone that I belonged on that Olympic team. And it didn't happen at US Nationals. And so I was quite upset. And I also realized like it wasn't the end. I still had more of a chance. I still had one last weekend of racing on the World Cup, and there was a skate sprint that I, have done well in. And so I kept trying to look forward and acknowledge the pain and the upset that I was going through, but also look forward and up and try to just focus on what can I do right now to prepare myself for the next thing and still give myself a chance.
Yeah. And I mean, you're in that position, right? You arrive to Oberhof. You're still in the top 50 in the sprint standing. So you're still objectively qualified on that World Cup. And it all comes down to this one skate sprint race, a race which historically you're amazing at. You've already had some top 30s on the season, but also all of your Olympic goals and the dream of, representing the US at the Olympics comes down to this one sprint race day. Walk us through the lead up to that day, and I guess I'd be interested to hear how the build up and that pressure, how did that affect your approach to the race, and then what was it like? How did that translate onto race day?
I had never actually raced in Oberhof before. I'd been there in the summer because they have a great indoor skiing facility, but I had never skied on snow there. And I showed up 2 days before the race. And so I had one opportunity to kind of prepare myself on the course beforehand and get to know the hill, the turns, the change in terrain, the transitions, all things that are so important in a sprint qualifier. And I felt like I was focused, and I was like, I'm here to prepare myself for the next day. I'm going to figure out what is my race plan. How am I going to execute? Where can I lean into my strengths on this course? And then where do I really need to focus on, the things that might be my weaknesses? Where do I really need to make sure I have dialed? And so I practiced, some of the cornering and various things. And I did a lot of journaling. And I kind of reflected back on like, what am I trying to do here? And it's really about like, I'm just trying to do something that I thought maybe I wasn't going to cry.
You're doing so great.
That I had thought of when I was 12 years old. Like, it would be really cool to go to the Olympics. And I was in a position where I was actually maybe doing that. Because when you're 12, you're like, oh, that'd be cool. But you're like, that's not actually going to happen. And then here I am at 29. Wait, this could actually happen. Like, this could happen. And it's so cool that I am in these shoes right now where I get to be trying to achieve this insane goal. And I kept telling myself, like, what would the 12-year-old Alayna think of that? And that made me smile. And I was thinking of that on the start line. In the final beeps to the start of the qualifier, I was thinking of that and smiling. And I felt like that's all I could really think about. And then, it was time to go. And I felt so strong and so dialed and so focused. All of the things that needed to be happening, I felt like were happening. I could tell my skis were fast. I could tell that I was primed and ready to go for this qualifier. And I freaking charged up this mountain of a hill, and I felt so strong about it. And there was a technical corner with a lot of deep slush, and I felt like I cornered it so perfectly. And I was working so hard to gain every single half a second that I could, that I came out of a tuck and started tuck skating in really deep slush that maybe I shouldn't have, because ultimately the tip of my ski got stuck in that deep slush as I was tuck skating and carried me over to the side of the course, and my ski just went completely off the course, and I crashed off the snowbank that, you know, was piled up 3 or 4 feet high of man-made snow. And I just flew right off it, and had my skis stuck in the trees, and they were so tangled. I had to just like unclip and take my skis off in order to get untangled. Um, and pretty immediately, like, I realized it wasn't happening. And um, I tried really hard to frantically get back up and get back on course, but I was stuck in a snowbank and trees and bushes, and um, you know, it was slush on top and it was ice on bottom, and I just landed right into the ice chunks. And um, I could not, it took me at least 2.5 minutes just to get untangled. And I tried to hop back up onto the course and thought, like, I can finish this. And there were girls still qualifying going past me on that stretch. And I was like, this is a safety concern. Like, I can't even get my skis on in here. And by that point, I just, like, I couldn't even get back on course. And um, in a race where all I really needed to do was have an okay day, I tried to have an outstanding day, and I was on my way to having an outstanding day, um, and it instead went to shit. And I didn't finish the qualifier, and I didn't score any points, and I fell just out of the top 50 in the sprint ranking.
Yeah. What's that afternoon like for you?
Very somber. And there's still one more race the next day. It's a distance race. I'm not technically in the top 50. I think I'm like 52nd or something on the list, but it's a classic 10K, and that's not necessarily my forte. And again, I've never even skied the course because I was so focused on the sprint that I didn't even really get a chance to ski the distance course. And so I was very upset with the sprint outcome, but I also kept looking forward of there's one more chance, and I have to give myself that chance, and I have to keep putting one step forward and not even focus. Like, I can't even think about anything else except for how am I going to prepare for tomorrow's race now. And I tried my best to believe in myself. And I feel like I went into that race. I mean, I told myself that I was going to repeat a new mantra that was, I'm somewhat embarrassed to say this, but I don't think I've actually told anyone this. But throughout that 10K, I just was repeating to myself, I can, I love this, and they love me. And ultimately, the they love me was the most important, because I felt like I knew that my support system was going to love me no matter what happened. And all I could do was give whatever I had left. And I mean, I was like skiing to the beat of that mantra in my head, and just repeating it over and over and over again for 30 minutes. And I'm really proud that I had that belief. And I feel like I had a good race, but it wasn't enough. to get into the top 50 on the distance list.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, getting through that 10K, I would argue, is just as big of a feat as anything after the DNF and the skate sprint. But unfortunately, you come out of Overhoff, you've fallen just outside the top 50 in the sprint standings. You didn't get into the 50 on the distance standings. And then you are the first alternate on the domestic. So based on objective criteria, you're not going to the Olympics. They do have an appeal for discretion spots. You submit an appeal. I think you and your coaches discussed this a lot and felt that you had a good case. Some of those other athletes on the domestic list, you had outperformed in a head-to-head on World Cup. You were just outside the World Cup criteria, and so you felt like you did have a strong case for getting discretioned on. Ultimately, you hear back that you're not going to be discretioned. They're not discretioning anyone, and you're not going to be included. What's that like? Finally getting that kind of stamp of confirmation that you're not being selected for the team and not going to the Olympics?
So brutal. I found out that it was a Sunday that we were racing in Oberhof, like Saturday, Sunday. That Sunday night and I'll say the next morning, we were going to travel to Switzerland from Germany. So I find out Sunday night at about 10 p.m. I get an email saying, "You've not been selected for the Olympic team." And I left my room. I was rooming with a teammate who had probably just received a very different email. And I felt like I needed my own space. And so I left that and found a private space in the hotel and called you and cried. Called my sister and cried. And yeah, it was like I felt like all I could do was cry. And I kind of felt like it had been 3 or 4 weeks of kind of not like pushing away the emotions, but trying so hard to focus on the next thing that I could do for myself that I hadn't fully accepted that that was possibly an outcome. And then it was all kind of crumbling at one time. And so I kind of just cried for a really long time in one of the hotel lobby bathrooms, and finally like decided I needed to go for a walk. And I walked around the tiny town of Oberhof at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and finally went to bed, I think around 2 or 3, and had to wake up at like 7 or 8, and then hop in a van with all of the other athletes and who had received very different emails the night before, and sat in that van for 9 hours to drive to Switzerland. I had emailed the coaches the night before saying I need to go home because like I'm not in a position where I can mentally be around the team right now or prepare for the next races. And they said the earliest we can get you out is Wednesday, and from Switzerland. And so I had to drive with them to Switzerland for 9 hours and then stay with them for 2 more nights in the hotel. And I was trying to really not let my emotions or mood affect anyone around me, because when you're traveling with a team like that, I mean, that like I know that the energy that everyone gives off, it affects everyone else, right? And the last thing I wanted to do was to let my situation affect the way others were feeling. And I feel like I did a good job at that. I was thankful I actually got a single, which I don't know if the coaches did that intentionally. But it allowed me to have a little bit more space, and then get out of there and get home.
And so after, I guess, right after the dealing with the logistics, you fly back east. What's that first day like? What's that first week like of kind of settling into the reality that you're spending February in Vermont instead of in Italy?
A lot more crying. The first day was, I felt like I had just woken up from like the worst nightmare. I did go skiing because I felt like I didn't really know what else to do, and it was kind of like the one constant that I felt like I could depend on, and it was just what I was used to. And also Vermont was having an epic winter, and the skiing was incredible.
Silly not to.
Yeah, it was not a fast ski. It was it was a pretty sad ski, but I kind of continued to do that for like a week, and you were in and out. You had your own ski season that you were coaching, and had to do some traveling, and so was in and out with you, but just trying to kind of begin to process the outcome, and understand, like, ask myself, do I want to keep skiing? Do I want to finish the season? Am I done racing? Am I done skiing forever? And those are some big questions. And so I did a lot of solo skiing, just thinking about that, and a lot of time reflecting. And you know I think it was pretty quickly I realized, like, I don't want to be done with this in this moment. This is not how I want to go out. And so I knew that the Lake Placid World Cups were coming up at the end of the season, and I felt like that was I wanted to at least get there and be able to race with this community and be part of that, and give myself that last chance to kind of determine how I want to view skiing, and not let this be the end. And so, in combination with a lot of tears, I also, as I don't know, Nordic skiers do, you just focus on what's the next thing, and kind of started to put things in place to prepare myself for some of that racing, and getting back into the racing environment. At the same time, the team was then announced to the public, and I started getting an overwhelming amount of messages from so many people, who, some I've never met, some I thought they had forgotten about me, some I hadn't spoken to in years, or some I had spoken to once. And they reached out and gave me so much life and love and support, and kept me kind of going one step at a time throughout those days, and um, reminded me that it's not all about the Olympics, and also it's not all about skiing or racing, right? Like, yeah, we ski race, but is it really about the result on a page, or it's about the people or the community, and the passion that we can share for something? And yeah, I really depended, like, or leaned into kind of those messages, and just the love, and that I received during that time.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, the two things that, right, that you say kind of helped you go through day to day is you were still setting goals for yourself, which I think is a super hard thing to do in that time, to look forward and still, after having not made it to a goal, not achieved a goal, right, to just keep setting another one, to work towards. And then also the community, I think, was a huge piece. Do you have any memories or certain conversations that have really stuck out to you, whether it was with a family or a friend or a fan?
I mean, the conversations I had with family and friends, like, they they helped me so much. They were there for me to just cry to, or cry at, and that was huge. I think what really sticks out to me is some of the people that I didn't necessarily know super well, who did reach out, or who I hadn't talked to in many years, who did reach out, or some of the younger athletes who reached out. And um, what really stood out to me was I ultimately decided to go back to the Midwest and race in the Berkey and another super tour that was at Worth. And I was really excited to be there for those races, but I was also pretty nervous about throwing myself back into the ski community during that time because I recognized I was still very fragile emotionally. And I think that, in a fairy tale world, you could say, like, oh, well, just use that anger and go prove them wrong and prove to them that, like, you should have been on the team, which, yeah, sounds amazing. I would love to do that. But I was like drained of everything. I mean, I had given this everything I had, and then it hadn't worked out, and I had just cried for a week, and I just I didn't have fight for me, like anything left, right? And so I was really nervous about being back in the racing community, at the super tour races at Worth. Um, but what was so cool and stood out to me was that some of the younger athletes that I had worked with during my time with Team Berkey, and I'm talking about like middle school, high school, young girls, they sent me a message in an email, and they also found me after the races and said, thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for telling us that it's okay to not achieve everything or reach your goal. And it's okay to fail. And the fact that they could articulate that to me, and also had like that they were willing to just reach out to me and say that, and recognize that, like, I mean, that meant everything. And I feel like how they showed up for me at those races to support me, I mean, they were also racing too, but they showed up with love and an appreciation, and a great reminder to myself that, like, not everyone is going to achieve the flashy goal, or they're not all going to get the gold star, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't try.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to just how cool of a community there is in the Midwest around Nordic skiing. And I think that these young girls would be so excited to know that the impact that you have on them, they also can have on you. And that while they maybe feel support or are pulled along by, looking up to Alayna and watching everything that you've achieved, for them to know that also they're helping to support you and helping you get through some of the harder days of your career and pull you out of some of the worst weeks, months of your ski racing career. I think is something really powerful and speaks to just how strong and amazing that community is. Cool.
Yeah, I feel like the weeks that I was back in the Midwest, both at those super tours and at the Berkey, were really great. It was like so terrifying for me to jump back into it, and it was everything I needed at the same time, because there was just so much love. I feel like I just keep going back to that, but yeah, really the people who showed up to tell me, like, it's okay and we love you anyway, and that doesn't matter, right? And even at the finish line of the Berkey, there are two like much younger girls who were there, and we're just so excited to get a picture and chat and share their story. And like, all of those moments just matter so much. And yeah, I think continuing to just also relate to people about not always achieving what you set out to do. As I've had more and more conversations with other people, like they've shared with me goals that they set and they didn't achieve, or or maybe that they were not sure if they should set, and then they realized that they wanted to.
Yeah. I see these 3 weeks of being back in the Midwest as, I mean, for me, I was super nervous watching you. I felt safe in Vermont with you. And I knew that on your good days, you were out the door skiing, doing your intervals and having a great day. And then on your tough days, um, it was hard to watch. And it was really nice for me to feel like I was here. And then while you were leaving, I know we talked about you being nervous about reintegrating into the skiing world and about what it was going to be like to get back on a start line. And you were nervous to see what you were still capable of. And I also know you were nervous to reintegrate, and that while friends and families and fans that saw you at the Super Tours or saw you at the Berkey, while they would be excited to see you, they would also know that, oh, you're here because you're not in Italy. And I know that that was weighing on you a lot going in. And then every call I feel like I got from you during that trip was just so overwhelmingly positive. And it was just so cool to see you having gone back to Team Berkey, 2 years ago, and wanting to give back and reintegrate into that Midwest skiing community, to see the community come together, and whether it was conscious and they knew what they were doing or whether it was just in their being, right? To see them come together and show you so much love, to bring you back up and to have you enjoy skiing again and enjoy competing again and go out and win another Berkey, right? To see that come together and to have that community come together and kind of raise you back up, for me was such a relief and really amazing. Should we talk about the Berkey a little bit?
Yeah, we can.
Silly to overlook it. Berkey week is, for anyone who, I guess everyone who listens to this podcast knows what the Berkey is. The Berkey is your favorite week. It is a cultish celebration amongst your family, which for me as an outsider is an experience to be a part of. But in tying that in, it's also a huge exposure week, right? What was it like sitting at, you're sitting at a sponsor table at the expo signing posters and everyone coming by? It's a little bit of that where it's, hey, Alayna, great to see you, but also, hey, I'm really sorry that you're here. What is that experience like? How was that? Was it this overwhelming feeling of love, or were there also some low moments that were tough to deal with? Because at the end of the day, you're supposed to be in Italy. You're not supposed to be at the Berkey, right?
Overall, it was still so positive. And there were times when there were conversations where I just felt like I wanted to be, like I'd had the same conversation already, and there were a lot of, like, I was trying to stay positive, and I knew that I was going to be okay through it, but I still was trying to, focus on like the race, um, and showing up as like my best self for the people who were there too. And um, so it was also very emotionally draining. Like, and I feel like that was just all of February was an emotional suck. And that drains you with your energy physically too. And so it was like the best and the worst of having all these conversations of, like, they were amazing conversations and I loved having them and I loved everyone who showed up. And it both gave me energy and took away energy in like this weird balance, I guess. But it just, I would say it gave me mental and emotional energy. It did suck a little bit of the physical energy out of me. But that's okay. I was looking for the emotional and mental positivity. So I was excited for it.
Yeah. And then, so coming off of the high, I guess, of finding that joy again to get in the Midwest with the Berkey and at those super tours, you come back east and you're going to reintegrate with the World Cup tour for the final stop, World Cup finals in Lake Placid. What is that process like? What are the, I guess, emotions going into that reintegration process? And then what is that like, kind of seeing the World Cup team again? At this point, we're post Olympics. But yeah, what is that reintegration process like? And kind of what is your mindset going into that World Cup finals?
I knew it was going to be really hard to reintegrate with the World Cup team. And so I prepared myself for that. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just like jumping right into it again. And there's like they're teammates of mine, and many of them are close friends, and so I was still in contact with a lot of them and having conversations and communicating, and so it felt like when I did finally see them, it wasn't like, oh, I haven't talked to you in 7 weeks and all of this stuff has happened. um, it was a little more gradual than that, and I did that intentionally because I knew it was going to be really hard to reintegrate with that entire crew. I think that having it be in Lake Placid was like best case scenario because it felt so familiar to me, and it felt like I was just back at another race that I've done many times, and everyone's speaking English, and yeah, there were so many like other familiar faces around that I could put my energy into. I also made the last minute decision. I was racing up in Quebec at Canadian Nationals beforehand, and I was planning to go right from Quebec to Lake Placid. That was going to give me like a week there before the races even started, and I realized the day before that that was too much time, and that I needed more space. And so I made a decision to go home for home to Vermont for like 3 or 4 extra days, and then go over to Lake Placid because I just felt like I didn't need all of that time. And it's not again anything against anyone. It's just that I still needed space from that environment. And so then by the time I did show up in Lake Placid, I was kind of ready to like, okay, let's do this. We're racing a World Cup on home soil again, and my family's coming into town, and so many friends and family are coming, and so was excited to kind of focus more on that rather than like the internal team or the dynamics there.
Yeah. No, and I mean, your decision, right, not to go straight to Lake Placid plays into that dynamic that we talked about before of what is the perfect plan to optimize my performance at Lake Placid, and what does Alayna the person need, and trying to find that balance. And I think that's something that, when you're in a fragile state like that, I think that you did a good job of maybe emphasizing what does Alayna need right now versus what's going to be the perfect next step. Now, I guess fast forwarding a little bit, you've had a month to decompress. How has it been reflecting back, I guess, on this journey of this season and of the last 4 years?
It has been a journey to reflect back on the journey.
A journey within a journey.
Yeah. And it takes time. It takes me a long time to process these things. Like it's a lot. And so for me, it can't just happen like overnight or in a day. It takes me weeks or months or years to process something, right? And so I'm sure that I will continue to be processing this for years to come. What I have processed so far, though, is that I did everything I could to show up as Alayna, the best athlete and person that I could for trying to make an Olympic team. And I surrounded myself with people that I love and who love me and who support me and who believe in me and who therefore then make me believe in myself. And, I have had, I've gone through sports psych, I've gone through life coaching, right? Um, Throughout many years, and not just this year, but something that someone has said, one of those coaches has said to me at one point was, how can you go through a tough scenario and still have respect for yourself? It's not about having respect for others or others having respect for you, but how can you get through this with respect for yourself? And it's something that I go back to a lot, and I feel like, do I have respect for myself? And ultimately, when I look back on how I handled everything, I do. And I'm really proud of that. And I feel like I handled it as best as I could. And I have thought a lot about what it meant to not achieve this goal that I had. And it felt like I was mourning the death of someone that I cared about so much. And, ultimately I realized I kind of was mourning the death of this dream that I had set out many, many years ago for myself and lost it. And I needed to go through the grieving process. And through that process, I ultimately thought about, okay, I didn't reach this goal. I failed to accomplish this. That doesn't mean that I'm a failure. And I'm so proud that I set that goal and tried to achieve it. And I think my biggest goal in having this conversation with you and releasing this podcast is to encourage others to set that really big, scary goal. And that it's okay if you don't make it, but it's one heck of a journey either way. And the people you get to meet and the places you get to go and the opportunities you get to have. And this could be for any goal. This could be for, finishing your first Berkey. It could be for getting a promotion at work. Like the things that you can then be proud of and gain respect for yourself for, and relate to others, and support others in, and gain support from people, right? Like there are so many things that are part of that process. And yeah, I hope that others also feel excited about setting really big, scary goals. And I know that this won't be the last one that I set.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. The question that everyone's asking, what does next season look like? What's next on Alayna's radar?
I'm still asking that too. Through all of this processing, I have realized I still don't want to be done ski racing. I love it so much, and it breaks my heart, but I love it so much. At the same time, I feel like I need a little bit of a change. And some of the changes that I do know are happening are that I'm moving back to Vermont to be back with you. You got a job out east, and so we're making a little life for ourselves back in Vermont. I will remain part of Team Berkey and will be a satellite athlete, I guess, but I will be back in the Midwest for various events and camps with the team, and still being very involved in the Midwest ski community. I know I will be racing next winter. I don't know exactly which races I will be doing. We're still waiting to hear back about Period 1 World Cup starts. If I get offered starts, I will take them. And I'm also looking to potentially explore some other types of racing, but still have to kind of wait on that a little bit. I think what I want to change for me is maybe start to loosen the grips a little bit. I had been quite focused on this Olympic journey the last few years, and I think there are other things in life that I want to also be able to explore at the same time. And that means that I need to loosen my grip a little bit on the skiing lifestyle. And so leaning into some work opportunities and some more opportunities to, yeah, just explore other areas of life.
Yeah, I love that. A few quick questions to wrap up the episode. What are you most proud of from this past season?
Oh my gosh. I think being resilient enough to keep showing up anyway throughout really tough times. And when you don't want to show up, or you don't feel confident about showing up, or you're not sure what the outcome's going to be, I just kept showing up and trying to put one foot forward.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's almost assumed that you're going to keep racing, right? It's, oh, you missed the Olympics, and so what's the next race? Like, oh yeah, you're going to go do the super tours. And actually going through this with you and seeing all of the determination and hard work that it takes to continue, and the willingness to be vulnerable again and to go to a super tour when you're feeling absolutely shattered, and show up at a race that everyone's like, oh my, Alayna's here, she's gonna win, like this is amazing, and to show up and be vulnerable again and go to a Berkey where it's expected that you're gonna win it for the fifth time.
Yeah.
But you have no idea, like they have no idea the energy drain that you've just gone through over the last month and a half. And so I think that it was really impressive, watching you while grieving, right, and trying to deal with the missing out on this goal that you had spent that you had put so much time, energy, emotion, everything into this last 4 years to reach this goal, to have that taken away, and to see the resilience of you to buy back in and to show up not only for yourself but for your community, and go and really just put yourself back out there, I think is something that for me, I'm beyond impressed with you. And it was really inspiring to watch you kind of pick yourself up, after that. And like I said, some days were great and some days were a disaster from the moment we woke up. But you took it day by day, and pieced it back together. And then you look at the end of your season and you look at your outlook now. And I don't know if that happens, right? If you don't have that determination, to take it step by step, and to really buy in. And it goes back to this sense that you're not just saying these mantras because they're positive mantras, it's because you believe in them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that belief is what helped you get through this and show back up, to compete again and to compete well again. And I'm excited to watch you keep competing. Which brings me to my next question. What are you looking forward to most for next season?
Well, okay. Well, I have a lot of thoughts.
Oh, sorry. We can go back to thoughts.
Well, I guess I just want to say that, you know, I don't think I could have kept showing up the way I did if I didn't have the people who reached out, the community that supported me, the sponsors that supported me. I mean, Gear West is the sponsor of this podcast, and they supported me through that time. They responded with like, how can we support you more, right? And they brought up doing a Berkey panel at the Berkey Expo, and like they gave me energy, like positive energy, right? And I want to thank Gear West. I want to thank all of my other supporters, all of the sponsors who have helped me through this journey, and then also just all the people. And like, there are so many that have meant so much, and the the smallest interactions have a really lasting impact for me. And I would not have been able to keep moving forward in the way that I did if I didn't have that support from those people. So I just wanted to pause and say, like, thank you to the ski community who showed up for me to kind of catch me and keep me going. And yeah, I think I'm excited to continue to find ways that I can give back to that ski community. That's the biggest thing for me for next year, is in maybe loosening the grip on the ski racing focus all the time will allow me to find more time and energy and opportunities to give back and do more outreach with the ski community everywhere, particularly the Midwest, because it is such a great place in my heart. But really, anywhere in the country or world that'll take me, I'd love to just find ways to be able to give back to it.
Yeah, I think that's cool. My last piece is, over these last couple of years, I feel like I've grown. I've been exposed to your level of fame and fandom, which is super fun for me to be a part of. Where we're running, and whether it's in Vermont or in the Midwest, we're running around and people are stopping to take pictures, or just catching up with you, and they know you from the podcast or your World Cup racing or different walks of life. You might not be an Olympian, but it struck me at Lake Placid as you were signing posters for some younger athletes that you are hanging on the walls, signed posters of Alayna hanging on the walls, of these young athletes. And I would just be interested what that means to you, and if you have any reflections on that, because any athlete, right? We grow up with our idols plastered on the walls, right? For me, it was a little bit Tom Brady, some Bodie Miller. And now for someone growing up, right, for these younger athletes, some of them have Alayna Sonnesyn hanging on their wall. What does that mean for you?
It means that they can do it too. And I had Jesse Diggins and Keegan Randall signed on my wall. And then I got to go on and be teammates and friends and like part of that, right? I got to reach that level. And I think that if anyone has a poster of me on their wall, that they should believe that they can too, like reach goals, dreams, whatever it might be. They can make it to junior nationals, they can make it to the state meet, they can make it to onto a college team, they can qualify for the World Cup, right? Like, believe in yourself, put in the hard work, show up consistently, and have fun while you're doing it. And if you keep doing those things, then like you can do it.
Yeah. I don't know what we usually do for the sign off on the Extra Big podcast, but I guess I want to take my last bit of time to thank you for coming on and for hosting this podcast on a regular basis and having a lot of amazing conversations, but especially for this episode to come on and be so vulnerable and open about the highs and lows of this past season. And I think it just is the exclamation point on your efforts to give back to the skiing community, and be available. And just your commitment, I think, to the Midwest and the Vermont and the skiing community at large. So thanks for coming on, and thanks for letting me make you cry.
Thank you for walking through this conversation. You know exactly what I was going through all winter, more than anyone else does. So thanks for your time in co-hosting the podcast. And if any of the listeners are still with us, it has been over an hour and a half of us talking. So we will let you get back to your days. And I hope that whatever you're doing while you're listening to this, you can pause and reflect on what big scary goal you're going to set for yourself next, because they're pretty fun to chase after.